So, this week in the Sacred Gathering, we're actually going to continue our conversation that we did last week. We talked a lot about kind of flourishing and what God's view is of abundance and living a good and full life, versus at times what sometimes our views are on that and what our culture tells us abundance and flourishing in the good life consists of. I wanted to actually have another week because we didn't get to some of the quotes, and I think there was an interesting kind of end piece to our discussion in that we were recognizing that in God's view, a huge chunk of flourishing and enjoying the good life is not in fact focusing on ourselves, but focusing on extending those blessings, that sense of wholeness and abundance to others. We have some responsibility for that as well. And so I wanted to kind of continue that discussion this week in the Sacred Gathering. So for the sake of this video, I'll do kind of the same thing I did last week. I'll read a few quotes, I'll give a few of my own thoughts, but I'm really looking forward to hearing everybody else's thoughts this coming Sunday. So the first quote I'm going to have us do is, of course, a repeat from Genesis chapter 1. God saw everything he had made. It was very good. The heavens and the earth and all who live in them were completed. And on the sixth day, God completed all the work that he had done. On the seventh day, God rested from all the work that he had done. God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it God rested from all the work of creation. And so I think there's a lot of things going on in this seventh day of creation, the idea of the Sabbath, the day of rest that is like God, that is holy. But I think for this discussion, the one I want to point out is I don't think God is resting because he needs refreshment, right? He does not need to be restored in some way. God is the source of all energy and light, and is complete in of himself. He doesn't become tired in creating the world. I think it has to do with just simply being with this created thing, of enjoying it and delighting in it, paying attention to it. And I think it's one of the major aspects of this continued practice of Sabbath, whereas we can tend to think we are only so valuable as we of the things we do, right? Sabbath is about being in God's presence, seeing what's around us, actually enjoying and recognizing both God's presence in our life and the many blessings and things we have to be thankful for. A huge chunk of this is we don't have to do to be valuable. We can thoroughly enjoy the things that God has given us because they're there when we're willing to see them, not always rushing on to the next thing. And so I think just that habit, that practice, which again shows up in the Ten Commandments, so you know it's fairly important, of Sabbath keeping, of taking time not just to rest, although that's a huge part of it for us as human beings who don't have unlimited energy and need that, but it's also to focus and be refreshed and delight and be thankful for God's presence in the many ways that he has blessed us as well. And I think we're going to see that understanding of Sabbath in the end is not ultimately about just us and our refreshment and our abundance, but needs to be extended to others as well. So first we're going to look at Isaiah chapter 61. And this is a little bigger of a piece, but this is, of course, the passage that when Jesus started his ministry, this is the passage he took as kind of his slogan of saying, yes, if you want a mission statement from me, this is what I'm all about. This is who I am, and this is what I do. And so those of us who are followers of Jesus, I think this needs to be our mission statement as well. And you'll see some just really neat things in here. The Lord God's Spirit is upon me, because the Lord has anointed me. He has sent me to bring good news to the poor, to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim release for captives and liberation for prisoners, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor and a day of vindication for our God, to comfort all who mourn, to provide for Zion's mourners, to give them a crown of beauty in place of ashes, oil of joy in place of mourning, a mantle of praise in place of discouragement. They will be called oaks of righteousness, planted by the Lord to glorify himself. They will rebuild the ancient ruins. They will restore formerly deserted places. They will renew ruined cities, places deserted in generations past. And so Jesus focused himself on, how this hands-on part of this, on bringing liberation to prisoners, bringing light to those in darkness, to healing the sight of those who are blind, etc. Right? Do we hear again and again in this things being made right, things being restored to their wholeness? Again, this is God's presence, God's blessing others by fixing those things, by taking responsibility for those other things that are broken and lost and whole. And so, a huge chunk of, I think, an abundant life, a full life, is not just seeking that for ourselves, but in fact, taking the responsibility to do our best to restore that which is broken, that which in other people's lives needs wholeness and fullness. And the images just keep piling on there, right? I love this: oaks of righteousness, oaks of rightness, these big, beautiful, flourishing trees that set things the way that they are supposed to be. Rebuilding ancient ruins, things that were good but have fallen apart. Restore deserted places to habitation, to wholeness. Renewing cities and deserted places to generations past. This sense of loss that I think defines so much of our broken world, right? The things that things are falling apart, things are going to be lost, is something that in God's kingdom is not so. We believe God is in the restoration business, of the wholeness business, of the healing business. But again, in passages like this, we see this is just not for us who know God and understand this. This is meant to be extended to other people, to be given to other people. This is a gift we are meant to share with the world. Another kind of articulation of that comes out of a book that I think is been very important for me, called For the Life of the World, by the theologians Miroslav Volf and Matthew Crossaman. And from that book, I got this quote: Christ came to call people to a flourishing life. Guided by God's kind of love and empowered by God's Spirit, all of us are called to flourish fully in the world become God's home, and partially on the journey there, rejoicing even while having to mourn, accepting lack willingly so that the needs of others can be satisfied, leading lives of courage and integrity as we struggle against the evils of this age, trusting and loving God, participating in God's mission in the world, and in all this growing into our own human fullness. And so, if we're looking at just this belief that I completely agree with here, Christ did come to call people to a flourishing life, but it's a very different life than I think what's often called the prosperity gospel, or what is lurking behind most of what we want in consumerism and most of us want out of life. We want to have enough money. We want to be comfortable. We want to be loved. We want things to fit and be easy and to be whole on the terms mostly for ourselves, right? And I think what Christ is inviting us into again and again is to say, no, actually, true flourishing is not about you having enough. It's not about the pieces fitting for you. It's about inviting others into that wholeness. It's about serving others. It's about sometimes defying evil. It's about working hard. It's about carrying burdens with others. There is a goodness and a fullness and a flourishing to life that ultimately we will experience those things when we do the work of extending those to other. And I say this because we see this in God's own life, right? I mentioned earlier, Sabbath is not about God being restored or refreshed. God is in of himself whole and full and does not need those other things. God is not lonely, as you sometimes hear the account, and that's why God made everything. God is a plurality. God is a trinity. God is a party in a lot of ways, right? And yet he recognized that the fullness, the best part of this, was something that he wanted to extend to others. And so this wholeness, this flourishing, is something that I don't think we can have when we're keeping it to ourselves, when we're self-contained. We were meant to be part of others' lives, to serve them, to work on their abundance. And there's so much need in the world, and it's not always just, it feels good to do things and to serve people. I think when when other people have abundance, when other people are flourishing and well, is even if that causes us to step into pain that maybe was not necessarily ours, even if it causes us to be misunderstood, or even as we did to God, right? Killed and tortured for the sake of offering a different way of being into the world, I still think at the end of all that, God is offering us an abundant life, one that looks different than me being comfortable and self contained, one that is risky in some ways because as I give things away, I fear, is there going to be enough left over for me, right? That is not the way God does things. God again and again says, I can provide. I will give you enough. So continue to give it away. Continue to step into people's lives. Continue to invite into this crazy dream that God is enough, that there is enough in the world, that abundance is possible, but it's not about gathering these things into myself. It's about extending those blessings and those loves to other people. And it's one of these things that you can get your head around, but truly trusting with our hearts that the more we pour out and into others, we watch them flourish and we watch them growing stronger and better, the more our own souls, our own needs, our own wants, our own flourishing will be encouraged by that. So I'm looking forward to hearing what practically people in our community are doing right now. I see a lot of this. I think there's a lot of people who get this. And I'm excited this week to learn from all of you because I need to help move this idea of understanding to kind of my heart, to the very way of being, to trusting God, trusting God's way of being full and flourishing, following Jesus in a very different way of doing things.